I was at Yashaba Rico from RicoScores, and I'm coming with a Rico report, a March 3rd edition. I almost said February right there, man. I got to get used to the new month. But either way, we're here to talk about a lot of random different things. If you don't know by now, Rico reports are where I just bring in a lot of different topics that I didn't necessarily feel like deserve like an entire video in itself. So we're going to jump around. First of all, I want to talk about the fact that FedEx Field finally has a new name. Already did a full deep dive for like over 20 minutes breaking down what happened with FedEx Field and why they need a new name and how FedEx left the deal early and things like that. We're going to talk about the new name. It's something that's so obvious that it's kind of like a little disappointing. Like, it's anticlimactic. But either way, we're going to give you that update and dive into that as well. Then we're also going to talk about Jamon Davis, our linebacker, avoiding jail time. I'm shocked. I'm not going to lie. We're going to dive into his whole situation, how he avoided it, what he potentially could have ended up getting, and then also why a lot of Commanders fans need to wake up on his talent under the new coaching of Ken Norton Jr. as our linebackers coach, Dan Quinn, head coach, and Joe Witt Jr. as our defensive coordinator. I'm telling you, if Jamon Davis can't work under those conditions, he's just not destined to play football. Then we also got to talk about a potential trade for Jonathan Allen after we cut Charles Leno and Logan Thomas and Nick Gates. Spot Track himself, the guy that runs it, literally brought up the fact that maybe the Commanders should go ahead and trade Jonathan Allen while they're at it to just keep skyrocketing with cap space and not only have the most, but have the most by far. And then we have a lot more topics other than that as well, because Adam Peters had a few interesting quotes at the combine that I want to update y'all on, and also Dan Quinn had a pretty cool interview with some interesting quotes from his time. And so all of that and more. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content coming with videos constantly, so stay tuned. I believe the next video is going to be my trade back mock draft, and again, like I spoke about in a previous video, that's going to be a combination of trade back scenario for those of y'all that want to trade back. Even though I prefer to take quarterback at number 2, let's explore trading back. Let's see how we can do it, how far we will go back, and what players we can get from it. But it's also a combination of that mixed with a lot of the combine standouts. I'm going to try to get us as many of them as we can, but I'm not going to be unrealistic. I'm not going to say that we're going to go out there and get an elite combine standout that's supposed to project to go like second round and I'm taking them in the 7th. We're not just going to be unrealistic, but we're going to try to do what we can to get as many combine standouts as possible in that mock draft. So stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let's go and get to this video right now. Let's get it. All right, so first of all, FedEx Field now has a new name. It only took a couple of days. We were blank field for maybe like 2-3 days, and now we already have a new name, which is really interesting. The Washington Commanders will now be named, stadium-wise, the Commanders Field. And it was previously known as FedEx Field before the naming contract ended, per Nikki Javala of the Washington Post. The original agreement for naming rights with FedEx was set to expire in 2026, although the shipping company exercised an opt-out provision in the deal before the end of 2023. The reason that opt-out happened is because when ownership was transferred from Dan Snyder to Josh Harris, the way that the contract was set up, it was like if a new owner buys the team, if you want to get out of it, here's your way of getting out of it. You're not legally obligated, contractually obligated to stay all the way through 2026. And FedEx Field was like, okay, this is our chance to abandon ship. We're going to do it. I'm not exactly sure why they wanted to, though, because I'm pretty sure that the Commanders looking for the next sponsor. I already did a full breakdown on this again, and I'll hold another video if you want a deeper dive. But I just feel like, for reasons I've stated in that video, that we're gonna have sponsors fighting over each other to become our next sponsor, and they may even be able to parlay that deal to an advantage to the sponsorship potential candidates, of not only being able to name this next stadium whenever that deal gets done, but to also potentially have first rights to name the next stadium that will get done, which may potentially end up being in DC. I also talked about that in that video as well, because we definitely got over some legal hurdles that were in the way as far as the RFK site goes. So go check out that video if you haven't already. But of course, just going back to the fact that the name is Commanders Field, very anticlimactic. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious. I feel like in that video, I may have even mentioned that they're probably just going to do something as plain, simple, and boring as Commanders Field. So I'm not surprised. Maybe that's just like a placeholder, like how we became the Washington football team after we got rid of the name Redskins until we got the name Commanders, which looks like it's going to be our name at least for the next couple of years, because that's not a priority of this ownership to change that. They may eventually change it. That's why I'm not calling it permanent, but I do say that name's going to stick around for a while. But either way, my main point is that maybe FedEx Field is the equivalent to the Redskins. Commanders Field is like the equivalent to the Washington football team. It may stick around for a little while. It's maybe just a placeholder for now. And then whatever the next name will be, whatever sponsorship we end up getting, that's going to be it. Of course, I'm from Atlanta, so I know Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is actually really weird because I feel like it's not talked about enough. The Falcons and Saints have the funniest rivalry in all of NFL, like, period. At the very least, the blackest. So, of course, to me, it's going to be the funniest with the way that the trash talking goes down. And I just think it's like really underrated how they stole the Saints sponsorship. They went from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in New Orleans to Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, completely took it from New Orleans. I'm not even exactly sure what stadium sponsorship they have now, but I just felt like that was such a petty thing. So if we could just steal the Cowboys, I think that would be great. Just take it from them, let them abandon ship from the Cowboys, jump aboard our thing, because we're on the up and up. I don't know about the Cowboys, but we're on the up and up. We're building a future Super Bowl contender. I truly believe that. And to be able to steal their sponsorship on the way up would just be amazing. Too bad the Falcons did that beautiful move and then it just wasted it away and not winning anything serious. So, but I thought that was a really petty part of their rivalry that maybe the Commanders could take a page out of their book. But again, I just want to emphasize the fact that Commanders Field is probably just a placeholder, or who knows, maybe it's permanent, but I feel like it may be just a placeholder for now until they find the next sponsor, which I don't know if that's going to be within the next couple of days or if it's going to take like a year. I doubt it, though. I feel like they're going to want to get that done as soon as possible because they're missing out on millions of dollars. With FedEx opting out of that deal, they no longer have to contribute the money that they were contractually obligated to contribute to the Commanders over those last 2 years. I believe it was like 14 to 15 million or something like that. I reported in the previous video. Now that's like potentially 14 to 15 million that the Commanders are missing out on because FedEx pulled out. So they're going to try to get a guy in as soon as possible. Josh Harris was already struggling, going broke just to buy the team. Then he also set aside $75 million as a budget to help rebuild and revamp and improve the current stadium and facilities in Virginia, all of that. And then for him to potentially do all of that and then get blindsided by the fact that he's missing out on other millions of dollars because FedEx wanted to leave for whatever reason, I'm pretty sure they're going to do whatever they can. They're going to be very aggressive at finding a new sponsor as soon as possible, I'm assuming, but I could be wrong. Now, next up, Jamon Davis avoids jail. I'm amazed by this, man. He got off very lightly. I know Virginia, I always hear from a lot of people that Virginia does not play. I've never lived there, so I don't know, but I always hear about how Virginia does not play, and Virginia even has something called a Commonwealth, and that literally sounds like the 1800s to me. Like, that's just a crazy, that sounds like somewhere you shouldn't be speeding. The Commonwealth sounds like they're gonna throw the book at you, so I'm just shocked that he even thought he could get away with that. Come on, Jamon Davis, you're from Georgia, you gotta do better than that, man. You gotta represent us way better than what you've been doing. But John Com tweeted / reported, because again, Twitter is now the space where people go to report things first before they even go to like an article or a news site or a major site or anything like that. John Com tweeted, Washington linebacker Jamon Davis issued a guilty plea in Loudoun County Circuit Court and was sentenced to 180 days jail time, with all of it suspended. Then his license will be suspended for 6 months and will do community service, and was fined $2,500 plus $176 in court costs. So apparently Washington Commanders linebacker Jamon Davis avoided jail time for a misdemeanor reckless driving charge, but had his license suspended for 6 months according to court documents filed Friday. So this news is like pretty recent, and John Com was in on it immediately. Davis has been scheduled to face a jury trial in Loudoun County Circuit Court on Monday, but his attorney, Mark Dyko, I believe that's how you pronounce that, was able to resolve the matter on Friday without jail time. Davis was fined $2,500 plus $176 in court costs. He was sentenced to 180 days of jail time, but with all the time suspended. Davis had been arrested on March 28, 2022 for reckless driving after he was allegedly clocked in his McLaren going 114 miles per hour in a 45 mile per hour zone in Loudoun County, Virginia. That just sounds silly. Why are you going almost 70 miles per hour over the speed limit? But want to be Dominique Toretto so bad, man. If you don't sit down somewhere, I just never understand that logic. 2 months later, he was convicted of reckless driving and sentenced to 30 days in jail, but he appealed the ruling because it was considered a class 1 misdemeanor charge in Virginia. Davis faced up to 12 months in jail time plus a $2,500 fine. Based on agreement reached in July, Davis would have served a maximum 80 days in jail, but Judge Stephen E. Sinkevich, how you pronounce that, maybe, said in court that he considered the deal too lenient and rejected it. So that was bad news. That was going the wrong direction for Jamon Davis. Another agreement that would have resulted in a minimum of 4 days of jail time was also rejected because Judge E. Plowman said it was not substantially different from the first plea deal. Then Davis had also been charged with reckless driving in December 2021, allegedly clocked in at 89 miles per hour in a 65 mile per hour zone. And that one I'm not as mad at, even though if Virginia is known to be that strict, I don't know why you're even going 66 miles per hour from what I'm hearing. In Atlanta, we have 55 miles per hour, and as long as you're in the right area, as long as you're not in like usually Clayton County or Douglas County or something like that, or Cobb County, you could be driving 120 if you want to. Usually, I mean, you could be in the left lane and a 65 mile per hour, and people are mad at you for driving 80 because everybody else wants to drive 90 to 100. If you're driving 80 something in Atlanta in a 55, you need to not be in that far left lane. But apparently places like Virginia are far more strict than that. And from my experience of driving in Maryland, boy, y'all do not play. Y'all have like the speeding cameras and things like that. The only place that we even kind of have that is school zones. We don't just have speeding cameras where police doesn't have to be present to clock you for speeding. It's just like a robot that does it and then sends you your ticket in the mail and things. We don't really have that. Maybe we have that in school zones, but a lot of the times they're just faking it anyway. So maybe that's why Jamon Davis wasn't aware that places in America were that serious about that driving fast and speeding thing. That incident in December 2021 when he was clocked going 89 in a 65, that was 4 days before teammate DeShazer Everett was involved in a crash that killed his girlfriend. Davis had been out with them that night and was driving his car ahead of them. And if they got into a crash driving that fast and Jamon Davis was ahead of them, I'm assuming he was speeding as well. So I don't know. This man has a speeding problem. I don't know what's wrong with him. I mean, the only place we want you to be fast is on the field, big dog. Chill out with all of that stuff. Hopefully you've learned your lesson now. It sounds like you somehow got away with having to avoid jail and things like that. Take that as a blessing, move on, and stop doing that, man, please. But moving on from the political side, jail side of everything, football wise, I want to remind people to not sleep on Jamon Davis. I've seen on the internet that a lot of people are like they've given up on him and things like that. And yeah, he hasn't lived up to a first round pick at all yet. He doesn't deserve his 5th year option picked up at all. I'm not saying any of that, but I do want to point out the fact that maybe it was more of a coaching problem than just a Jamon Davis problem. I'm not completely alleviating him of any blame. I'm not just taking away all of the problems from his end. I feel like he did contribute to some of it on his own as well, but I also feel like coaching was a big issue. And I think bringing in Ken Norton Jr. as our linebackers coach, Dan Quinn as our head coach, and Joe Witt Jr. as our defensive coordinator, I mean, honestly, if Jamon Davis can't ball out under this coaching staff, then I don't know where he can, honestly. That's why this coaching staff being so proven and experienced in player development especially is so great, because now we know that if a player is bad, it's because that player was just simply bad and that's it. With the previous regime, it was hard to tell if it was the player or the coaching. And now I'm not saying that this coaching staff will just be perfect, but now it does feel like when in doubt, we can have faith that the coaching staff did their side of the job, and we can isolate the problem and just specifically look at the player like, hey man, if you're not balling out under these conditions, under this coaching staff, under this system, I don't know where you can, and maybe you're just not fit to ball out in the NFL. So that's the real big advantage of us having the coaching staff, because now we can start to isolate. Okay, can't be the coaches, gotta be the player. All right, now we know for a fact it's the player, or at least more than likely, because again, this coaching staff won't be perfect. perfect, of course. That's why they were available for us to hire them in the first place. But now, more times than not, we can be like, all right, this player is struggling. All right, time to get a new player. You know, so I like that. Also, Jamon Davis, don't forget the fact that he's a freak athlete. Now, let's not forget that. Only a handful of linebackers in the NFL are even comparable in athleticism compared to him. Now, just imagine what that natural God-given talent can do under this new coaching staff and this new scheme that he's about to play in. And what has me really excited is that Jamon Davis is probably going to go after the quarterback a lot more in this new defensive scheme that is very aggressive under Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. And he'll be playing forward more and backwards less, I'm assuming, even though we've seen big flashes from him in coverage. I like him playing backwards, side to side in coverage and things like that, but I prefer for him to go get the quarterback. I really do. Especially, remember that Falcons game when he was in coverage there last year? That boy clutched up. I was at that game, boy. He went stupid in the fourth quarter, and I can really easily see him also becoming more consistent in coverage under this coaching, but more importantly, going after the quarterback, man. You saw what he did to Russell Wilson in that Denver Broncos game last year. Oh my Lord, he had that boy in a box. Pretty sure Russell Wilson had Jamon Davis nightmares for the next couple of weeks after that, man. I mean, I don't know if Russell Wilson has ever gone against a linebacker that fast. They just literally wouldn't let up on him that entire game. Also, shouts out to Mark Tyler for pointing this out, because since Jamon Davis only played in 12 and a half games in 2023 before he got injured, he was technically on pace for, if you were to take that data and then expand it over the course of an entire 17-game season, he was on pace for 120 tackles, 10 tackles for losses, 4.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 1 interception. Now imagine what Dan Quinn, Joe Wood Jr., and Ken Norton Jr. are going to get out of this guy if he was able to excel like that in that extremely passive Jack Del Rio system that was also like ranked dead last in a lot of statistical categories last season. So it's not even like he had a lot of help around him. Granted, the defensive line was pretty good, but then after we traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young, I mean, you could even argue before we traded those guys that it may not have been that great, just more so because of scheme more than the actual players themselves. But hey, man, I'm expecting big things out of Jamon Davis. I'm not going to lie. Maybe I'm not guaranteeing that he's ever going to live up to 19th pick overall in the entire draft. I believe when we got him, I know it was in the first round sometime in the teens. I believe it was 19th, but either way, he may never live up to that. But I'm also just hoping, and I'm very confident again with this coaching staff, that they could at least get him closer to that than what he's been so far under Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio in the past. Now, next up, apparently, some people feel like Jonathan Allen should go ahead and get traded from the Commanders to whatever team to free up even more cap space. This came out after we cut Charles Leno, Logan Thomas, and Nick Gates, and basically Spot Track themselves was looking at, okay, now they have the most cap space in the NFL. If they want to keep going to clear up a lot more cap space, they tweeted a name to keep an eye on in trade discussions this March could be Commanders defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, who is entering year 4 of a 5-year, $82.5 million contract in Washington. The 29-year-old carries a $15.5 million salary, $0 guaranteed in 2024. If Chris Jones stays in Kansas City, Jonathan Allen could be on the move. And I mean, I guess I can see it, but I don't really like it. Like, I completely agree with @CommandersRealm on Twitter, because he said he also wouldn't like it. He said, especially after shipping off Montez Sweat, with all of that cap room, I think that they can afford to let some talent play out their quarterbacks. We don't have to get rid of everybody type of thing, and I definitely agree. And also on top of that, with Payne being slightly more expensive and statistically less productive and efficient, if I had to choose between the two, which one had to go, it would probably be Daron Payne more than even Jonathan Allen, even though I would far more prefer to keep both. I'm not saying I want to get rid of Payne or Jonathan Allen, but if you had to force me to pick, I would pick probably Daron Payne, very slightly splitting hairs. But again, I already know that when we're talking about Jonathan Allen, some people are probably curious, thinking in the back of y'all heads that, you know what, how does RicoScores potentially feel about between Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne? Who would you give up? So I wanted to make sure I went ahead and answered that now. But of course, again, I want to reiterate and re-emphasize, super emphasize, that I want to keep them both long term until they can't play football anymore. But if I had to choose between the two, I would probably prefer to keep Jonathan Allen, especially since he's like the face of the franchise type of guy as well. Now, moving on, Adam Peters also had some really interesting quotes recently. Now, he was asked about potentially trading up, and I felt like the answer wasn't really worth diving into, because he basically said like, yeah, we'll trade up, we'll trade back, we'll sit where we need to, whatever it takes to make this team better, we're willing to do it, which was really just a political surface answer that really didn't give us anything. That's why I didn't really want to dive into that. I wanted to acknowledge the fact that I did hear it and I saw the video, but it was nothing really to talk about there. So moving on, he alluded to the fact that the Washington Commanders may not be big spenders in free agency. Adam Peters via G&D on Washington having the most money to spend in free agency, he said, quote, 90 million is a big number. We'll spend a lot less than that. Don't want to set too high of expectations. There's a lot of holes we need to fill, but we're always going to build through the draft as a team. He wants to be a build through the draft type of team. And so we may spend some money to fill in some holes to at least be a competitive roster. But he's basically saying, don't get your hopes up high, especially as a fan base, that we're about to go out there and sign Mike Evans, Brian Burns, and Bobby Wagner all at the same time. Give me Patrick Queen and give me Tyron Smith. Like, even though we have the money to potentially do that, he's saying don't expect that. But he also didn't shut the door on the fact that they may not at least get one or two signings that would make us fans very happy. But he's saying that just don't expect us to spend all $90 million of this cap space at one time in one offseason. And then also, shouts out to my boy Mason Kinahan. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Everywhere he does great articles, breakdowns, mock drafts, everything. Great follow. And when it's like training camp and things like that, he's one of the people that's always uploading the clips. So that's a great follow. He brought up a great point. The top 5 spenders in free agency back in 2023, Chicago, Carolina, Arizona, the Jets, and the Lions. Does not necessarily mean that when you spend the most money, you win the most. Spending and winning do not directly correlate. You would hope it does. You would think on paper that it does, but not necessarily. And then going back to 2022, Jacksonville, Buffalo, Miami, the Jets, and the Patriots. Now, granted, Buffalo panned out pretty well. Jacksonville panned out pretty well until they had that big fold. And then Miami, I guess, kind of a little bit. I mean, Tua getting hurt. I mean, how can you really blame them for that? So 2022 has a better outlook on potentially if you spend a lot of money, maybe it equals more wins. But then again, you still have New England top 5. You have the Jets number 4, and they didn't do much winning at all in that 2022 season. And then again, going into the 2023 season, the offseason before that, Chicago, Arizona, and the Cardinals. I mean, golly, that's not good at all. I mean, granted, shouts out to Chicago, Tremaine Edmonds, and a few of those signings. DJ Moore especially. Us Commanders fans know that, but that was via trade. We know that the Bears made some pretty good moves in the offseason to improve their team, but the Panthers and the Cardinals and the Jets, whoo, not much. Now, shouts out to the Lions, though. But again, I just want to prove the point that spending a lot of money in free agency does not automatically mean that you're going to be a great team. Those are your top 5 spenders in free agency the past couple of years. We'll see who are the top 5 this upcoming year, and then if the data actually changes and there's a new trend, we'll see. Also, Adam Peters via the Grant and Danny show, he talked about potentially retaining some of the staffers who were part of the previous regime. He said, quote, they're not holdovers. They're a part of the new staff. They're starting over. Whatever they were doing before, they are part of what we're doing moving forward. They're here because they deserve to be here, because they are really good people and they are really good at what they do. Unquote. And the reason that quote stands out is because, again, I've talked about this in other videos, but now that's like a direct quote from him breaking down the logic behind it. But he's basically saying that, like, hey, man, all of these scouts, they've done all of this work leading up to this draft. And basically, why would we fire them before the draft? Now, maybe after the draft, typically when a new GM and a new regime comes in, if they're going to fire their scouts, if they do, it's usually after the draft. He's basically saying that, hey, man, I'm actually pretty high on these scouts and the guys that were already here. We'll evaluate them throughout the offseason, but at the very soonest that we may end up letting any of these guys go is potentially after the draft, because that's typically when it happens for any new regime coming into any franchise in the NFL. That's just how it goes. But again, he says that he's high on these guys, so maybe a lot of them end up sticking around even beyond just the draft. But they've already reported that Marty Hurney will not be here after the draft, and maybe some scouts will go with them. We'll see. Also, Dan Quinn spoke to the NFL insiders during the combine. Like, you know how everybody comes up there and actually speaks to like Daniel Jeremiah and those guys every now and then. And at one point with Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, and those guys, I love the quote that he said. He said, quote, "I plan on having a blast kicking A-word," unquote. And I was, of course I was pumped up about that. It's a whole 4-minute, 18-second clip. So there's a lot of gems that he dropped. But I feel like the most notable one is the one that George Carmi pointed out. Make sure you follow him as well. Great breakdowns on Twitter and YouTube at GCarmi21, GCARMI21. Brought up a great point. I don't know if it's common practice, but I think it's pretty cool that the staff got together and essentially created a vision board for each position on the roster. 2 positive takeaways I deduced. Number 1, it gets our entire staff on the same page. It promotes dialogue. And number 2, it's evidence of coaching experience, roster management. Quinn shared that he did this in previous stints as well. It seems like a thorough and productive process, and I completely agree wholeheartedly, 100%. We finally have grown men professionals handling what this team does, especially on the football side of things. With Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, we have all of these guys that, and this is perfect. Also, another benefit to this is because we have so much experience in our coaching staff right now. We have ex-defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators and head coaches coming here to be run game coordinators, linebackers coaches, senior defensive assistants. Like, they're all of these, a lot of these guys are taking major demotions to come here and just be a part of this coaching staff. And with all of those egos and experience and confidence and things like that, and bright ideas and geniuses, there's an argument that maybe we have too many chefs in the kitchen. But Dan Quinn and Adam Peters are doing a great job of making sure everybody's on the same page. And I already talked about how Lance Newmark, one of the main reasons Adam Peters wanted to go get him from the Lions, went and handpicked him himself, just like how John Lynch handpicked Adam Peters from the Denver Broncos and brought him to the 49ers to be his assistant GM. Adam Peters did the same thing with Lance Newmark, bringing him from the Lions to the Commanders. And he noted that one of the main reasons is that Lance Newmark has one of the best processes as far as like evaluating the combine and really scouting talent throughout the entire offseason when it comes to pro days and things like that. We send our scouts with a certain list of traits. Like for running back, we want them to be best at this, this, and this. Now, if they're good at these other couple of things, other few things, that's great as well. Note that. But when you're watching these guys go running around through the combine and all of these different type of things, going through different scenarios, or even if you're watching tape, we're looking for these traits as our priority, and then these are kind of secondary. These may be third in line and whatever else is extra. So we have like a clear vision on exactly what we want on our team as far as each position groups. So I love that, and that's a big part of what Lance Newmark is bringing to the team. And it just seems like we just have this beautiful vision, a cohesive thought, goal, and vision for how we want this team to work. I mean, you saw Joe Witt Jr. in his press conference, Dan Quinn as well, about the spirit of this team, the identity that we want to have, the emotion that we have, where Joe Witt Jr. said that this may not be for everybody, players and coaches. This requires a certain level of commitment emotionally, physically, and mentally, and we're definitely, at the very least, we're going to have an identity on both sides of the ball. I'm very excited about that. We're going to be that team that everybody hates to play at the very least. We'll see how many wins we get this first year with the identity, but I love the fact that they're very committed to a sincere, specific, detailed, and consistent, hopefully, identity. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, really random news. I don't know if y'all noticed, and this is not necessarily like Commanders news specifically, but everywhere that I do mock drafts ever since like yesterday, Drake May goes like first overall and Caleb Williams is available second overall far more often than it used to be. Like a week ago or more, you would have to refresh the simulators like at least 12 times to get Drake May to go first. Now, literally earlier this morning, the first time I set up the simulator, Drake May went first overall. Again, the first time I just clicked on the website, said go simulator as the Washington Commanders 7-round mock draft, Drake May went first overall immediately. It's happening way more often, I've noticed over the past couple of days. And of course, we should not look into that too much, but I posed the question to y'all: do these mock draft simulators, from what they're seeing and hearing behind the scenes at the combine, a lot of those guys that do those simulators were present at the combine, and maybe they're hearing GMs talking, president of football operations, owners, head coaches talking, and maybe there's momentum for Drake May to potentially go first overall to the Bears. Who knows? Again, don't read into it too much, but I just noticed that. I had that observation, and I just wanted to throw that out there for y'all to hear as well. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes, or maybe it's completely nothing at all. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know if you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, I'm working on a trade back mock draft that's also going to highlight a lot of combine standouts. So if you want both of those, make sure you pull up to that video as well. Stay tuned. Again, I'm releasing like at least 2 videos a day. So when in doubt, if you haven't checked this channel recently, go check it again, because when in doubt, I've probably already put up a new video even if you didn't get the notification. So stay tuned, man. I really appreciate y'all. Stay patient with me. I'm trying to get to the comment section and read and reply to as many as possible, especially that Drake May versus Jayden Daniels video, because I know that's going to be very controversial. I already know before, without even looking at the comment section yet, I already know some people are swearing that I'm too big of a Drake May fan. Some people are going to swear I'm too big of a Jayden Daniels fan. You can't win, but I'm excited to get in the comment section and debate with y'all and see how y'all feel about the video and all of that. So of course, let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. The new Commanders Field name and how boring it is. I mean, that's literally the name, Commanders Field. I was just saying it because I was saying it's the Commanders Field, but I mean, that's literally the name. Very anticlimactic. Let me know how you feel about the Jamon Davis situation. First of all, with him avoiding jail time, thank goodness as far as Commanders go, his family, everybody that loves Jamon Davis, I know they're excited. But of course, let me know if you agree with me as far as him being a really best kept secret, one of our best kept secrets on the team right now, that under new coaching, he may be that guy. We'll see. Also, let me know how you feel about what Adam Peters said about us potentially not being big free agency spenders. Do you agree with that philosophy? Like, do you want us to be or do you not want us to be? And then also, projection wise, if you had to make a prediction, do you think we will be or do you think we will not be? Also, let me know how you feel about potentially trading away Jonathan Allen for even more cap space. Let me know that and everything that we discussed in this video. So I appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.